As many of you already know, Busch Gardens Williamsburg is going to be adding a very strange addition for the 2023 season. Nicknamed Project Darkoaster, this intamin multi-launch Curse of Dark Castle replacement is sure to thrill guests of all ages when it opens. Everyone was expecting to see a Curse of Dark Castle replacement sometime in the future. However, another Busch Gardens multi-launch coaster was certainly not on the 2023 bingo card. So let's try to piece together exactly what's going on here. Let's see if we can figure out what Busch Gardens was really thinking with this project, and maybe, just maybe, there's more to this than meets the eye. So let's start with the basics. What is Project Darkoaster? Well, Project Darkoaster is the 2023 edition for Busch Gardens Williamsburg that is set to be built inside the former Curse of Dark Castle show building. The coaster, manufactured by Intamin, is likely to feature 2 launches, bank turns, S-bends, and a bunch of theming. But the ride isn't your ordinary family indoor launch coaster. In fact, this ride has a few tricks up its sleeve. For those of you who don't like spoilers, here's your warning to skip ahead just for a few seconds. Now, for everyone that's left, remember how I said the ride would feature 2 launches? Well, the ride actually is going to utilize a clever switch track method that allows the train to traverse the layout twice, meaning this tiny little coaster will have a whopping 4 launches. And for being so short in track length, that is definitely a big deal. As for the theme of this ride, it is currently unknown, but it will probably pay homage to the original Curse of Dark Castle. As for the train, the ride is likely going to feature motorbike style seating. Now, I have a lot to say about the train, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So as you can tell by the mock-up on the screen, the make it or break it factor for the ride is going to have to be the theming. Depending on how well the ride is presented, it can either be an amazing experience or ultimately a pretty boring ride. But let's try and take a step back so we can figure out what Busch Gardens is actually thinking and what they're going for, because arguably this seems very similar to other coasters already in the park. Ironically, Verbolten is located relatively close to Darkoaster, and it's a partly indoor coaster that has 2 launches and is geared towards families. Granted, Darkoaster is probably going to be a lot tamer than Verbolten is, but at least those 2 rides seem very similar. And not to mention, they both have a surprise feature to them. So what exactly is Busch Gardens' mindset? What are they really thinking? Well, this brings us to the first of many theories. If you notice that Darkoaster's manufacturer is once again going to be Intamin, it shines some light on what possibly could be happening. Intamin was the company that just built Pantheon, and they were also rumored to build Drakenspeyer, but that part's for another video. So one rumor that has been tossed around a bit was that Intamin offered BGW a package deal to build maybe their next 2 or even 3 coasters at a slightly discounted rate. Now, I'm not sure if that's the actual case, but it would make a little bit of sense. It would strengthen the relationship between Seaworld Entertainment and Intamin, so it's definitely plausible. Now, the idea to replace Curse of Dark Castle has been around forever, ever since the park closed the original ride. The park likely went through plenty of iterations of ideas. They probably considered at least 2 main ideas and variations upon them, and this was a full new dark ride or an indoor coaster. They probably decided upon the indoor coaster because it would be cheaper in the long run and ultimately better received. Just think about it. If the park was going to rebuild a brand new dark ride and make Curse of Dark Castle 2.0, this ride would have to be better than the original ride. And let's face it, Curse of Dark Castle was hard to top. It was revolutionary for this time, and it was one of the best dark rides on the East Coast that was not at Disney or Universal. That means the park was going to have to spend a lot of money on a replacement for it, if they wanted to make guests happy and have a new ride of the same caliber. The reason the coaster is a better idea is that you're not comparing it to its predecessor. If it was a new dark ride, you'd be constantly comparing it to the original Curse of Dark Castle, and it likely wouldn't be as well received. This new coaster is a whole new experience, and the only thing that it will be compared to is probably going to be Verbolten. So we can all agree that the coaster is a better economical decision and is a better strategy for the park, but something is still not adding up. The layout of this attraction is pretty much not that exciting. In fact, the max height for this coaster is probably only around 30 feet. And while I get this is technically supposed to be a family coaster, it's in a very confusing spot in the lineup. Having the coaster be in the dark is pretty daunting for younger kids, so they definitely aren't going for that demographic of little kids. However, the ride's layout doesn't look that amazing for adults either. So what piece of this puzzle are we missing? Well, here are a few explanations that would explain why Darkoaster is so confusing. One possible explanation is that the theming of this attraction is simply going to be amazing. Maybe the ride is going to have epic theming for a SeaWorld park. So maybe it's more than just a coaster, maybe it's a dark ride roller coaster hybrid. You aren't going super fast during the layout, so this is definitely possible. But let's think about this logically. Is SeaWorld really going to go above and beyond with theming for this? Well, doubters would tell you to look at Pantheon Station, and you can clearly see where their level of theming is at. But I do think there is a difference between these two. SeaWorld didn't highly theme Pantheon because they didn't have to. People would still ride the ride regardless if the station and the ride was themed at all. Project Darkoaster is a little different though. If the ride is just a kiddie coaster in a box, it would not be appealing to guests at all, and it would be horribly received. So I definitely think SeaWorld is actually going to spend money on quality theming. Now, do I think this is going to be Disney and Universal quality? Well, no, but I do think it's going to be pretty good. Secondly, I think there could be more to the trains than meets the eye. Right now, the trains are rumored to be a motorbike-style intamin train, which is very likely and has a lot of evidence behind it. But I think it could maybe, just maybe, have one other feature to it. Now, this is super unlikely, and it's a bold prediction, and it's probably not even going to happen. But maybe, just maybe, the cars could also spin. And this is where my theory goes absolutely crazy. Remember that feature that I talked about earlier? Well, if you don't want any spoilers, skip ahead again. But a spinning coaster would make it the perfect layout. It would make perfect sense. Imagine if you went through the layout the first time as normal, and then when you go around the second time, you go through the switch track and the cars start spinning. Kind of like Cobra's Curse. Now, like I mentioned, this is really unlikely, but it definitely fits with the other elements that this ride currently has, and think about the potential for theming. And the last idea that goes along with this crazy theory is that the launches keep getting progressively faster. Let's say each time you go around they increase by 5 miles an hour for each launch. So for example, the first launch is only 25 miles an hour, and then the next is 30, and the second time you go on the layout it's 35 and then 45. Now, this one is a super unlikely one, but who knows? Anything is possible at this point. So those are just some of the reasons that Project Darkoaster just plain confuses me. And without at least one of those elements that I just talked about, the ride as a whole would seem pretty mediocre. But luckily for us, I think this ride will have a combination of the things we discussed, but I definitely think the theming is going to be pretty solid. So those are just my thoughts on Project Darkoaster and Busch Gardens 2023 edition. If you have any thoughts, please leave them in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and don't forget to subscribe if you're not already. This is the Coaster Josh, signing out.